Hey everybody, welcome back. Something that's been in the conversation a lot as of late has been that tourism in the United States has absolutely been crumbling. And there's obvious reasons for this, yes, but let's go over 5 of the big ones. Because tourism affects pretty much every corner of this country, and a collapse in tourism actually affects around 150,000 jobs. So even though many of them are seasonal, people do depend on these to, pay for their lives. So it isn't something that we should just sneer at and say, well, people aren't coming in. The first thing, of course, is the geopolitical tension and boycotts that are happening all over the country and world right now, especially when we're looking at Canadian and European bookings coming into the country. And because a lot of the tariffs and because a lot of just the saber rattling and talk that's been going on, those bookings are actually down 70% right now, especially in Canadian tourism coming into America. And most people don't realize just how important Canadian tourism to America is when it comes to our tourism industry here. But of course, it's not just Canada. Like I said, it's Europe. Germany is down 28%, Spain 25%, UK 15%, and South Korea 15%. And even though companies like Air Canada have slashed the prices of flights coming into the United States, there are still 30% less border crossings happening between Canada and America. And of course, that leads to one of the biggest reasons for Europeans and Canadians mostly on why there is this boycott happening, and that's border control and stricter visas. As we've seen over the past couple months, there's been stories of people from all over Europe being detained and thrown into ICE facilities or holding cells, for weeks at a time. People just coming over here not to live, but just to go on vacation. And that's going to scare people away. It's going to create, a culture of fear when it comes to tourism in America. It just doesn't feel like a safe place. It creates a lot of mistrust and uncertainty in the entry points because people start to think, what happens if I messed up on my paperwork? Am I going to get pulled into a back room and black bagged and sent to an ICE facility? It is a real worry, and it is warranted under the political climate that we're in right now, when we're seeing these kind of things not just be normal, but are being excused and validated by the media. And of course, like I said, this affects local economies all over the country. It's not just the big cities like New York, Miami. You're talking about smaller towns that rely on tourism, whether it's small towns in Wyoming, small towns in Vermont. In Vermont right now, the tourism industry there has just been absolutely hammered. And like I said, these are seasonal businesses that a lot of these small communities rely on to keep the town going. And because they're not having that influx of Canadian tourists coming in this summer, it's going to create a position where they're really going to have to tighten the belts through the winter and hope that tourism comes back next year. But the fact is, this boycott, right? The world's kind of done with America right now. There's other options for them. And there's good odds that, until this president is out of office, that these boycotts are going to continue. So these small tourist towns all over the nation, but especially closer to the border, they're going to have to expect this kind of dry season going for the next 4 years, which in all honesty could cause a complete shutdown of these local economies and businesses to absolutely shudder. The third reason, of course, is the strong US dollar and rising cost. If you've traveled in the United States, we just got done with a road trip. We drove from our house in Ohio to Hilton Head, South Carolina, then to Nashville, Tennessee, and back. And I can tell you right now that for a family, you're looking to spend about $500 a day just to travel. And that's not even at these destinations. And the prices there, because they're in tourist zones, are also going to be inflated. It creates an environment where it's just unfeasible to support that kind of travel domestically in the United States. So think about people coming in internationally. If you're from a country like Canada, where the Canadian dollar is far weaker than the US dollar, of course, it's going to price out a lot of tourists from actually being able to travel in the United States. But not just Canada, of course, that's people all over the world. Though the dollar to Americans may be getting weaker in relation to other currencies, it's actually holding pretty strong. So the cost here, while they're expensive to us, the rising costs hit us hard. If you're a tourist coming into America, you're getting absolutely slammed. This is draining your pocketbook hard. So like I said, tourism dependent workers, people who work at hotels, people who work at restaurants in states like California, Nevada, Florida, they're seeing huge decreases in bookings and events through pretty much every sector of their economy. And what happens with this when these start to go down? they start to cut jobs to save money so they can actually be in business next year, praying that tourism is going to return. That brings us to number 4, of course, and this kind of goes off of one of the earlier points. We're just talking about political image and safety concerns. When people look at America now, as a recent Pew Research poll done, where America was actually seen as a very unsafe and uncertain location to travel to. And that bodes very unwell for the tourism industry as a whole. And like I said, when we're talking about these high-profile deportations and arrests that have been done on tourists, it just creates a situation where people don't want to come to the United States. They'd rather search out other more affordable options where they don't have to worry about being black bagged by ICE. Of course, when we're looking at New York City, for instance, you're looking at 3 million less travelers this year. That's a multi-billion-dollar loss in the tourist industry. So again, a place like New York, which expects a high flow of tourists, has a ton of businesses that are reliant on those numbers. But if they're not coming in, these small businesses are suffering. Because when you're talking about a big city like that losing multi-billion dollars, a lot of the taxes that come from tourism, that go into infrastructure, that go into schools, that go into medical services, those are being cut short as well, which means that in those sectors as well, when you're talking about teachers, when you're talking about doctors, you're going to be seeing cuts from these very important employees, just so these industries can really stay afloat. And like I said, this entire situation has really caused a complete shift in the tourism industry, and it's just leaving Americans out of it. Like, tourism in America is dying. It's dying. But in other parts of the world, because of that, because people are shifting, because they still want to go on summer trips, people still want to go explore the world and live their lives, they're just not going to do it in America anymore. So what you're seeing is, like, travel bookings between America going into Canada are up 221% right now, as it's seen as just a safer, more affordable, more attractive destination than a lot of the places that people usually go into America that are too expensive, have too much crime, and too much of a risk of being caught up by Border Patrol and whatever policy is happening at the moment. Other than Canada, when you're looking at a lot of the Asian and European travelers, you're seeing Japan, South Korea, Italy are getting huge boost in tourism right now. And like I said, those are tourists that you would usually normally come to America. But in these countries, even a country like South Korea, which is expensive, a country like Japan, which is expensive, it's just not as expensive as it is in America. And even though there are hard travel restrictions to a country like Japan, when it comes to a lot of other countries, it's still seen as a safer, more attractive offer than the US is right now. And of course, the consequences to all this right now is a $23 billion loss in domestic profits that come from tourism. And all the taxes that come in from that, like I said, go into education, medical service, local economies that depend on tourism. Where my family lives in Wyoming, right now, it's the summer season. They're used to having a lot of international tourists that can't afford Jackson, Wyoming to show up there and spend money. But it's too expensive to go up there now, because even in a small town like that, you're looking at $300, $400 a night just for a hotel. This prices most people out. So that affects all the small businesses there because it's a complete slowdown. And like I said, this impacts workers and working class people, because when those businesses need to cut money, the first thing that they're going to do is cut the employees. And when the tourism industry supports between 150 and 250,000 jobs all across this country, that's a lot of people who are living in uncertainty right now, whether they can make enough money to actually survive in these small towns where they live. And of course, most of all, the impacts of the infrastructure that this has on the schools, on the hospitals, on local businesses. We're used to our government spending a lot of money, but this isn't money that goes to the government. We're talking about $23 billion that goes into small businesses and, of course, your hotels and corporations. But of that money, like I said, a lot of that does go to small businesses and does go to support the lives of many, many, many people. So because the policy and decisions that are being made either by our politicians or our corporations, those in power right now, we're seeing this is going to have a massive effect, and it is having a massive effect, as we're noticing everywhere we go, it's just a little more empty. No one's spending money. And this pushes us just a little bit closer to a recession that is just a damn near certainty at this point when you're looking at decisions that the Fed are making, when you're looking at the spending policy, when you're looking at the housing market. All these things get wrapped in together to really show us that the clouds on the horizon is a storm that we aren't really prepared for. But, agree or disagree, tell me what you think. Thanks again for stopping by. If you're still here at this point, like and subscribe. We appreciate the support as always. If you're noticing tourism in your area is booming or it's going away, I don't know, put it in the comments section. Let us know if what we're hearing is valid or not. But hey, we appreciate you. We hope you have a good one. Take care.